Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to Breathe, Empower, and Evolve with Tina podcast, where we explore all things that awaken your true purpose. I'm your host, Tina, and I'm here to share stories, wisdom, and insights to inspire you to live a life of authenticity, alignment, and flow. Together, we'll dive into spirituality, breathwork, somatic movement, human design, so much more. This is a space for deep transformation where you're invited to step fully into your power and evolve into the highest expression of you. You are beautifully unique, so why show up to life as anyone else? Let's go. Hey, welcome to the podcast. I'm happy to have you here today. So today I am going to expand a little bit on a blog post that I put out recently, as well as a short YouTube video. And this is all about the authority crisis. And this is really around why us as capable women can't make decisions. And I know this so well because I lived most of my life like this, probably until about maybe 8 or so years ago when I hit rock bottom and I thought, fuck this, I can't live like this anymore, and went down on this deep dive of spirituality and finding myself again. And I can reflect now and look back on how much I was in this authority crisis. I really had no idea who I was and why I was making decisions that I was. And I want to be really clear that this is not a character flaw within us, and this is certainly not evidence that we're broken, because we are meaning-making creatures. We want to make sense out of things, so we go and look for evidence as to why we're weak or we're broken and things like that. This is not about that. This is really how we have been conditioned from a very early age to show up, especially as women, and how society has really taught us to distrust ourselves. And we've really slowly lost touch with ourselves. And in losing touch with ourselves, that disconnection, we've actually also lost trust. We've lost trust in ourselves. We've lost trust as to what our desires are. We've really forgotten how to live unapologetically as ourselves. And this is where we move into the identity trap. And this is all about us attaching our identity with who we think we should be based on our roles in society. So whether, you're a mother or a business owner, a wife, it doesn't matter what particular title you're associating yourself with. It's how we're attaching ourselves to these roles, and then we make these our identities. And these identities become priority over our actual own inner truth, ourself. And I also want to bring in human design here. So two very important energy centers that we can look at in terms of human design is, the first one is the heart center. Now, the heart center is, in human design, a motor center, and the theme around this center is self-esteem, willpower, our wishes, our motivation, our desire. And you can have a defined or undefined heart center. And the theme around the defined center is having a very strong, consistent motivational willpower. And the undefined is where this willpower fluctuates. There's an inconsistency in that energy. And there's no right or wrong or bad or good in human design. It just is. So if you have a defined heart center, and mind you, this is only about 37% of the population, this is where you do have that consistent energy of willpower, of self-esteem, of self-worth. And, this is particularly relevant to the material world. And if your heart is in something and you're motivated about something, you have the ability to move mountains if your heart is really in it. And if you follow your heart, you can achieve whatever you set out to achieve, and you follow through that task because you're so motivated. You have this consistent motivation about that. And when you're living out of alignment, if you have a defined heart center, this is what we call like the not self theme, or in your lower expression, you can have like an inflated ego, and or you can make promises that you just can't keep because you're like, I can do it, and you're trying to follow this consistent energy about this, having this willpower to do things. And so you may have this tendency to overwork despite the fact that you really do need rest. And also in the lower expression, which is really important to what I'm talking about today, is there could be this propensity to really shrink yourself to make others feel more comfortable. And so I have a defined heart center, and I resonate with this deeply. I know that throughout my adult life, or even probably my teenage years, that I really shrunk myself, even to the point of I would downplay my happiness. Like if I was happy about something, or something was going really well for me, and I came across someone who, was feeling a bit down, or, things weren't going well for them, and they'd ask how I was, I would downplay my happiness because I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable of me being happy. And so that's in the lower expression of the defined heart center. So that's really important to what we're talking about today. Now, if you have an undefined heart center, this means you have an inconsistent energy around the willpower and self-esteem. And now, again, there's no good or bad, right or wrong. It doesn't mean that you lack willpower. It just simply means that you're inconsistent with your energy around that. So the lower expression for an undefined heart center, it could be insecurities around this, of needing to compete with others or to work harder or prove your worthiness, because there's this real sense of unworthiness. Whereas when you're in your highest expression or your true self, you're really at peace with yourself. You really recognize your worth and the value that you bring to the world, and that you bring to people around you. And you don't feel like you need to compete or prove anything to anybody. And so with the lower expression, again, it's just that constantly seeking worth or validation from others, or from jobs, or from possessions. You may be buying all these things, because you need these things or these others to bring you worth. Now, the other energy center from human design that's really relevant regarding what I'm talking about today is the identity center, also known as the G center. And so the identity center is really about our sense of self, our sense of direction, our self-love, our purpose. It's really where that question lives of who am I? It's really about that connection to soul. And so if you have a defined identity center, that you have a very strong sense of who you are. And if you have an undefined identity center, you really are adaptable and flexible with your environment. So again, no right or wrong, or good or bad. Being undefined means that you're flexible, you're open, you can, it's a real chameleon and shapeshifter energy around an undefined identity center. So with the defined identity center, being in your lower expression or being out of alignment, you have this propensity of not really recognizing or noticing that the environment you're in could be harmful towards you or not. And you could have this sense of being stuck in this unhealthy identity, or feeling like you need to stay as this one person or this one identity. There also is this, when you're in your not self, the lower expression of defined energy center, of wanting to condition others around you for them to follow your direction instead of finding their own direction. And you get really bogged down on what they're doing and what they're choosing to do. Whereas when you're in your higher expression, you have this real sense of direction and purpose. You're really solid and certain in your character. And, you're just really consistent, reliable around who you are. And so with the undefined identity center, as I said before, it's this real chameleon and this very adaptable and flexible, and you can change and shapeshift depending on the environment or the people that you're around, which is really a superpower. However, with that superpower, when you're in your not self, your lower expression, you're doing that out of fear of not fitting in, out of fear of not belonging or upsetting people. You also may feel like you become very insecure or obsessed around finding who you are, finding your purpose, finding yourself, feeling like, oh, I'm this and that. I don't really know who I am. And I've gone from this job to that job and I like this and I don't like that anymore. And so there's this real conditioning around feeling like you don't know who you are. Whereas when you are in that true self and you are that chameleon, that shapeshifter, out of adaptability and out of really standing in your truth of being very aware of your environment and being very attuned to that and being very adaptable to that. And that is, as I said before, it is a superpower. Now, going back to this identity trap that I was talking about before, so we can look at these two energy centers in human design to really have a good understanding of where that's playing out in our lives, and we can attach that, go back to these roles that I was talking about, and whether you're really aligning yourself to simply be these roles, and that those roles are your identity and they are your priority in life. And so through that, we start losing ourselves and we start second guessing ourselves and relying on others to make decisions for us or to tell us what we should do and how we should do it. And just, going with the flow and not really having a say or listening to your own opinions. And I know that this was me. I certainly didn't have an opinion about anything. I just sort of went along with the flow, really attached myself to this identity of being easygoing and non-opinionated. And this was this label that I had attached to myself. And really what I was doing is I was just completely disconnected from who I was. I was disconnected from my own truth and allowed others to speak for me. And that became conditioned in me from a very early age. And this is key because we were born knowing our inner desires. We weren't always like this. You think about when we were babies, when we needed something or wanted something, we expressed that, and we expressed that without any shame or guilt. It's just, this is what we wanted, this is what our needs were, and we were true to ourselves and we expressed that. And then slowly our outer world started to condition us and teach us that our desires weren't important anymore and that what we wanted wasn't important anymore. And so this slow conditioning started to occur and we started behaving in a very different way. I can think about school in particular. Authenticity was frowned upon, honestly. Like, you couldn't, if you were different, you would get bad attention. The teachers didn't like you and you'd be put into this group of being a troublemaker or not wanting to conform. So conforming and being the good girl and going along with things was actually recognized and rewarded. And so this is where our conditioning really comes into highlight, that we go from having our own inner truth and our desires, and we start losing that and we start being disconnected with that. And then we move into adulthood, and this conditioning is really reinforced. You think about workplaces where feminine insights and intuitions was looked at as being this weird woo-woo thing, whereas we know now that when we tune into our body, when we tune into our gut, our inner knowing, that is the truth. And so much good comes from that when we actually listen to ourselves rather than listening to that logical path that sometimes things fail because we're thinking about the logical risk around things. And at work, it was really rewarded about this get in and get shit done, head down, wear this uniform and you have your hair this certain way and you can't wear this and you can't do that. There's this real conformity again. Like, we go from school wearing these uniforms and being in these strict routines and into the work environment. It's just so similar. And this is how we've become conditioned to these workplace cultures and these societal expectations. And so this environment is just reinforcing this conditioning and reinforcing this disconnection from ourselves. And then social media. God, don't get me started on social media. it's just this false sense of people's lives, and then we look at that and think, oh my god, look at how amazing their lives are, and this and that, and we start comparing ourselves to that, and then we start feeling bad about ourselves, and we go down this spiral of not appreciating who we are and comparing ourselves to others. And this is where it leads into this seeking trap, because as intelligent women, we start actually becoming aware of that we've lost, touch with ourselves, and we recognize that. And so we embark on this journey of self-discovery. And this in itself can actually become another way of outsourcing our authority. And so, we put our power into other people to tell us how we should be, how we can be better. And so we look to these teachers and these gurus of telling us how we should be. If we don't want to be this way, well, tell me how I can be this way. And so then this becomes this seeking trap. And I know this. I know this so well because I lived in this for so many years. As I said, when I hit rock bottom and, I didn't want to live that way anymore, I went searching for everything that would fix me. And, I would attend all these online masterclasses and these courses and these certifications and all of these things to find myself. And I can reflect now, looking back, that I was in this seeking trap. And all I needed to do was come home to myself, to come home to my inner truth and really understand and embody that. And we can turn to the universal laws for some of this wisdom in terms of, think about the law of reflection. And so the law of reflection is all about our outer world as a mirror to our inner thoughts, our inner beliefs, our emotions. And everything that we are experiencing external is always some kind of reflection to what's actually happening within us. And so our inner world, so our mindset, our feelings, is mirroring that in our relationships, in our circumstances, our events that we encounter in life. And so when we think about the law of reflection, this is suggesting that our challenges, our conflicts, and even the positive experiences that we're experiencing in our lives are reflections of our inner personality or our inner state. We can also think about the law of responsibility here. So, what is responsibility? It is to respond with ability. And at its core, we are responsible for our own thoughts, our own actions, our own experiences. And so every action, every decision, every thought that we create, it ripples the shape of our reality. And so this law reflects the idea that no one else can be in control of our lives except for us. Every outcome is a reflection of our own choices. And that idea of radical responsibility, like embodying that, feeling that, acknowledging that we create our own reality and we can't blame anybody else for what's going on in our lives or for our circumstances. Now, let's bring this back to the nervous system, because our nervous system holds the key, because this authority crisis, it lives in our nervous system. So when we've been taught that our own knowing, our inner desires are dangerous or unreliable, well, then the nervous system learns to actually shut down those signals. So our nervous system needs to build the capacity to hold this. So if we don't build our capacity to hold what we want, we are living in this fight, flight, freeze or fawn situation all the time, and that's what's running the show. And we all experience this in different ways, and it could be, becoming numb or disassociated with your feelings. It could be this constant mental chatter, which actually drowns out our own bodily wisdom. Could be anxiety when you're faced with decisions or challenges. As I said, like, it could be numbness or disassociation. There are so many different ways that our nervous system copes when we're in this fight, flight, freeze or fawn situation. And you think about how remarkable our system is to adapt to that. And, I am in awe all the time about how adaptable and how sophisticated our system is. But when our nervous system is shut down, when it's losing connection with our own inner truth, then what is the cost of that? What is the cost of that in our inner world? The law of correspondence is a really good example here. So within, so without, so above, so below. Again, very similar to the law of reflection. It's, what's happening in our outer world is happening in our inner world, and they're a mirror to each other. So the real cost of this disconnection is really stealing life from us. We are living our lives based on somebody else's idea of how we should live. We are basically sleepwalking through our lives because of these conditionings, because of these societal expectations to be a certain person, to be a certain role, to be a certain title. And that can be exhausting. When you're living out of alignment, that is completely exhausting. And then we build resentment towards people. We develop anxiety. We start to have health issues. Our physical health starts to show these symptoms of what we're not addressing in our other fields of our being. And so what I have found in my studies and what I've experienced myself is that we can reclaim our inner authority. And there are so many tools and modalities that we can use to reclaim becoming more in touch with this again. And as I said, with human design, understanding your energy centers is a really great way. However, the embodiment of this, the awareness practice, the nervous system regulation practices are really key here of coming back in touch with your body and understanding your feelings, because some people can't even articulate how they feel because they've just lost touch with their feelings. They become numb to that. So when you ask someone, or how are you feeling, they can't actually articulate that. And so using these embodiment practices to really come back in touch with ourselves is key in this process. And through the process of reconnecting with your own inner authority, reconnecting with your true self, that's where you can practice things like putting boundaries in place, taking back your power that you've given to other people, not seeking that external validation all the time, because you actually have everything that you need inside of yourselves. And so it's just, building this trust muscle about setting boundaries. And then every time that you honor your own boundaries, you are building that trust muscle. And so when we do this little by little, step by step, this is where change happens. This is where we start trusting ourselves. And this is powerful. This is powerful. And especially the more women who trust themselves, like, we will change the world by listening to our own inner authority, our inner truth. We can change the world. So the key message with all of this is that your inner authority isn't missing. It's just waiting for you to come home. It's waiting for you to reconnect with it. And your body is always giving you information. It's always talking to you. It is always telling you whether something is aligned or not. And so it's really that practice of listening to that. And that could be a gut response. It could be just some energetic shift that you feel. It could just be this knowing that you have. It's all about reconnecting what that feels like to you, coming back into that inner authority and that inner truth. And so the journey back to trusting yourself, it isn't about adding more information or knowledge. It's about unlearning the lie. It's about the deconditioning of that lie, of that limited story, those limiting beliefs that everybody else knows better than you do about your own life. Okay, well, I think I'm going to wrap up for today. Thank you so much for listening. If this resonated, just keep following along, because we're going to go a bit deeper into what it actually takes to trust yourself again. I hope you got out of this episode what you needed, and until next time, I look forward to talking with you then.